As you all know, Thursday, the 4th of March, is World Book Day, and we have been looking at a number of activities both in school and at home on our remote learning platforms. We have been reading a couple of books to different people in school, and we are also recording some clips and chapters so that we can send them home as well. I was looking at a book for our older groups in school, and we had to pick a book which matched a publisher that was giving permission for people to read the stories. I adore the Harry Potter series, and they are published by the company Bloomsbury. So instead of me reading a part of the Harry Potter books to you, I'm going to read another book to you, which is called Quidditch Through the Ages. Now, you can get this book in the school library, but certainly you can still buy it online. Quidditch Through the Ages, Chapter 1. The Evolution of the Flying Broomstick. No spell yet devised enables wizards to fly unaided in human form. Those few who transform into winged creatures may enjoy flight, but they are a rarity. The witch or wizard who finds himself or herself transfigured into a bat may take to the air, but having a bat's brain, they are sure to forget where they want to go the moment they take flight. Levitation is commonplace, but our ancestors were not content with hovering 5 feet from the ground. They wanted more. They wanted to fly like birds, but without the inconvenience of growing feathers. We are so accustomed these days to the fact that every wizarding household in Britain owns at least one flying broomstick that we rarely stop to ask ourselves why. Why should the humble broom have become the one object legally allowed as a means of wizarding transport? Why did we in the West not adopt the carpet, so beloved in the Eastern Brethren? Why didn't we choose to produce flying barrels, flying armchairs, flying bathtubs? Why brooms? Shrewd enough to see that their muggle neighbours would seek to exploit their powers if they knew their full extent, witches and wizards kept themselves to themselves long before the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy came into effect. If they were to keep a means of flight in their houses, it would necessarily be something discreet, something easy to hide. The broomstick was ideal for this purpose. It required no explanation and no excuse if found by muggles. It was easily portable and inexpensive. Nevertheless, the first brooms bewitched for flying purposes had their drawbacks. Records show that witches and wizards in Europe were using flying broomsticks as early as 962 AD. A German illuminated manuscript of this period shows 3 warlocks dismounting from their brooms with looks of exquisite discomfort on their faces. Guthrie Lachlan, a Scottish wizard writing in 1107, spoke of a splinter-filled buttock and bulging piles. He suffered after a short broom ride from Montrose to Arbroath. A medieval broomstick on display in the Museum of Quidditch in London gives us an insight into Lachlan's discomfort. A thick, knotty handle of unvarnished ash with hazel twigs bound crudely to one end. It is neither comfortable, neither is it aerodynamic. The charms placed upon it are similarly basic. It will only move forward at one speed. It will go up, down and stop. As wizarding families in those days made their own brooms, there was enormous variation in the speed, comfort and handling of the transport available to them. By the 12th century, wizards had learnt to barter services so that a skilled maker of brooms could exchange them for potions his neighbours might make better than himself. When broomsticks became more comfortable, they were flown for pleasure rather than merely used as a means of getting from point A to point B. Broom sports emerged almost as soon as broomsticks were sufficiently advanced to allow flyers to turn corners and vary their speed and height. Early wizarding writings and paintings give us some idea of the games our ancestors played. Some of these no longer exist. Others have survived or evolved into sports that we know today. The celebrated annual broom race of Sweden dates from the 10th century. Flyers race from Kopparberg to Arjeplog, a distance of slightly just over 300 miles. The course runs straight through a dragon reservation, and the vast silver trophy is shaped like a Swedish short snout. Nowadays, this is an international event, and wizards of all nationalities congregate at Kopparberg to cheer the starters, then apparate to congratulate the survivors. The famous painting Gunther der Gwaltig, as in Gunther the Violent, dated 1105, shows the ancient German game of Stichstock. A 20-foot high pole was topped with an inflated dragon bladder. One player on a broomstick had the job of protecting the bladder. The bladder guardian was tied to the pole by a rope around his waist so that he or she could not fly further than 10 feet away from it. The rest of the players would then take it in turns to fly and attempt to puncture it with specially sharpened bits of their brooms. The guardian was allowed to use his or her wand to repel attacks. The game ended when either the bladder was successfully punctured or the guardian has succeeded in ensuring all opponents were out of the running or had simply collapsed from exhaustion. Stichstock died out in the 14th century. In Ireland, the game of Cunningham flourished. The subject of many an Irish ballad, the legendary wizard Fingo the Fearless is alleged to have been one of the champions. One by one, the players would take the dom or ball, usually the gallbladder of a goat, and speed through a series of burning barrels set high in the air on stilts. The dom was to be thrown through the final barrel. The player who succeeded in getting the dom through the last barrel in the fastest time without having caught fire on the way was the winner. Scotland was the birthplace of what is probably the most dangerous of all the broom games. Criachen. The game features in a tragic Gaelic poem of the 11th century. The first verse of it says, in translation, "The players assembled, 12 fine, hearty men. They strapped on their cauldrons, stood poised to fly. At the sound of the horn they were swiftly airborne, but 10 of their number were fated to die." Kraken players each wore a cauldron strapped to their head, and at the sound of the horn or the drum, up to 100 charmed rocks and boulders that had been hovering 100 feet above the ground came crashing towards the earth. The players zoomed around trying to catch as many rocks as possible in the cauldrons. Considered by many Scottish wizards to be the supreme test of courage, Kraken enjoyed considerable popularity in the Middle Ages, despite the huge number of people being hurt. The game was made illegal, though, in 1762, and though Magnus Denhead MacDonald spearheaded a campaign for its reintroduction in the 1960s, the Ministry of Magic refused to lift the ban. Shunt bumps was most popular in Devon, England. This was a crude form of jousting. The sole aim was to knock other players as quickly as possible off their brooms. The last person remaining on the broom won. Swithin Hodge began in Hertfordshire. Like Stichstock, this involved an inflated bladder, but this time it was a pig's. Players sat backwards on their brooms, batting the bladder backwards and forwards across a hedge with the broom ends of their brooms. The first person to miss gave their opponent a point, and first to reach 50 points was the winner. Swithin Hodge is still played in England, though it has never achieved much widespread popularity. Shunt bumps survives only as a child's game. And at the Marsh, however, a game has been created that would one day become the most popular in the wizarding world. We know that to be Quidditch. If you want to read more, you can get the book Quidditch Through the Ages by J.K. Rowling from the world of Harry Potter.